Something I talk about a lot is how much more we would enjoy our lives and how much more we would enjoy ourselves if we remembered to consistently ask ourselves, what would your best self do?
I know you want to kiss me.
What would my best self do in this circumstance? I was talking to a couple of my friends about this, and they had mentioned that they never thought of that before. And so I thought I should dedicate an entire episode to it because I feel like I've spent the last almost 2 years of my life talking on this podcast about how you have to show up as your best self. And I never have dedicated an entire episode to what that concept looks like. And for something that I think is so important, we got to talk about it because it's really the easiest and most effective way to apply all of the things that you learn into your life. And when we're learning about self-help, at least this was my experience, and I've heard this from friends, family, that when you're trying to show up as this better version of you, you're looking into how to do that. You're reading the books, listening to the podcasts, watching the videos, scrolling on social media and seeing all of the things that you could do that would make you a better person, quote unquote. But the issue is getting stuck in that knowledge to skill gap. You know what to do. You logically understand how to execute it, but you don't have the skill set in order to actually execute what it is that you're learning. But because it's mental, it's not physical, we think, why can't I figure this out? I logically know how to do it. That means that I should be able to do it. I should be able to execute it. But it doesn't work that way. Just because you know what to say to stop people from gossiping at the table, just because you know what to say to set a boundary, just because you know that you just need to talk positively to yourself in order to squash your negative self-talk, doesn't mean that just because you know it, you can execute it. So when we consistently remember to ask ourselves, what would my best self do? How would they show up in this situation? It's going to take you out of that knowledge space and allow you to start taking action on the things that you know would make you your best self, would make you feel proud of how you handle certain situations, so that you don't walk away from a situation that you should have stood up for yourself feeling like an idiot or like you were walked all over or damn, I should have said this or I should have done that. You'll actually be able to move in the direction of doing it and feeling good because you've done it. And that's who you are now because you're acting in that way. So how do we actually start showing up as our best self? Decide who that person is. That's like the number one step to working towards this, is just having a general idea of what your best self looks like, who they are, how they feel, how they act, how they show up in the world. You have to actually talk about it and not out loud necessarily to anybody else, but just to yourself. Like actually have a conversation with yourself about what that person does. You can't keep it in the shitstorm of your mind. You have to be able to bring it out into your conscious awareness so that when you're in a quick situation, you can know what you in a neutral state of mind would qualify as being your best self compared to maybe being in a situation that you have heightened emotion and you are going to react however you would react, so that when you get back to your neutral mindset, you think like, God, that's not how I wanted to handle that situation. So if you map it out ahead of time, it allows you to have that conscious awareness. So when you're caught off guard in a situation that you have to ask yourself, what would my best self do in this situation? You're able to pull that out and use it right away. You can absolutely map this out. And like I said, I think you should map it out. I have 10 things that I qualify as who my best self is on a widget on my screensaver on my phone, so that I can read it and revisit it and think about how I could show up as that person in my day-to-day life. And they change. It's an ever-changing list. You can take things away and add things on as things become more important to you and things become less important to you. But having that idea mapped out so that you can have it in your conscious mind, like I was saying, but also it's not always that serious because your best self will always change in every single circumstance. So if you're with people that, get a rise out of you or make you feel more anxious or make you feel like you have to walk on eggshells in order to fit in with them, is going to be a different best self from when you're around all of the people that love and accept you for who you are. And you know that you can show up however, and you'll feel good about who you are. You don't have to question if you're doing or saying the right thing. So we can decide who that best self is ahead of time, but we also have to remember to allow ourselves to decide who our best self is in a specific moment. When you walk into a situation and somebody is not being kind, and you feel in that moment like your best self is to speak out about it, go for it. That's what your best self would do. But maybe in another circumstance, your best self would decide to just keep quiet. It's not worth it to don't put your energy towards it. It's not like it has to be set in stone. You're not picking the things that you determine as your best self and never deriving from them, because different things are going to make you feel different ways, are going to make you show up in different ways. But if you remember to pause before you open your mouth and ask yourself, what would my best self do? You'll have a better chance of showing up as that person and then walking away from that circumstance feeling good about how you handled it, compared to feeling like you could have done something different or you could have done something better and just acting based off of your emotions to whatever circumstance is happening in that moment. So mapping it out ahead of time so that you know how to behave on a day-to-day basis in a way that you would feel proud of, but also knowing that just asking ourselves that question before we react to something, and even if it doesn't align with what we've mapped out, although it probably will be similar, it will allow you to give yourself some grace if you don't act exactly as maybe you would have wanted. Something I've seen people talk about when it comes to this is creating an alternate identity. I tried to do this for a little while and it didn't necessarily work for me personally, but I do think the concept is really cool, that you can rely on this alternate identity. Like if you have ever heard my friends would do this, that we would like create a name for our drunk version of ourselves, like whoever that person is. You're like, oh yeah, God, Carol's here, look out for her, because it's like an alter ego that you step into. So creating an alter ego for this like best version of yourself that you would like to become, and naming that person and giving them characteristics and how they show up, so that you can lean on that alter ego to get you through a situation that you don't know if you as yourself would be able to handle 100%. So that you can lean on that alter ego to get you through a situation that you don't necessarily trust yourself to get through. Because a really common feeling that happens when you start trying to show up as your best self is you feel like you're being fake. Like you feel like the people around you are going to judge you or notice that you're acting differently. You feel like you're betraying yourself in a weird way. It's almost like you feel like you can't show up as this person because you've already acted in a certain way for so long that it's too late. You can't be a new person. You can't be this best self that you would like to be. So it allows you to kind of lean on that alter ego version of you so that you can say to yourself like, oh yeah, that's just Ashley. That's how Ashley acts. That's how would Ashley show up? How would that person be in this situation? And it's kind of like you're acting, you're playing like a role in a movie until you feel comfortable enough to be able to show up as that person on your own. You can't expect yourself to show up as your best self on your first shot. This comes back to the topic that we were talking about at the beginning, is the knowledge to skill gap. There will be this knowledge to skill gap that happens when you start to try to self-improve. Self-improvement and showing up as your best self takes practice. And that's something that is so underrated. It's not talked about enough. When we think about a child learning how to ride a bike, we don't expect the child to jump on the bike and suddenly be ready to ride the Tour de France. You expect the child to fall a few times. They would need training wheels. Eventually they would get better at it. And then if they had enough practice over and over and over and over again, you do races at home, you do races in your town, maybe you do a cross-country bike situation, and then maybe you're able to do the Tour de France. There's going to be a lot that happens before in order to get you to your end goal. But because it's a physical thing, it makes logical sense to us how that would work out. But because it's a mental thing, being your best self and being able to execute how you behave, we don't allow it that same credit. We don't give it the same grace. If you have lived your life thus far as a perfectionist and every single thing that you do, you feel that you have to be perfect at, and you've built that mentality after so much time of being that way, it's going to take a long time. It doesn't have to be like forever, but it's going to take some time to be able to undo that and start showing up in a way that allows you to be imperfect, because it's going to feel so unnatural to you because you've been this way for so long and probably have built up this really strong belief that that is the only way that you'll be successful. So you're going to have to really do things that make you feel uncomfortable and screw up sometimes, because you're still going to fall into those perfection pits, and allow yourself the time to start doing things that are more imperfect. I think a really good example that I like to use for this is setting boundaries, that you know what to say to set a boundary. You know what you want. You know what you can say to that person in order to set a boundary with them. But boundaries are one of the scariest fucking things to set. And so it's going to not be the very first time that you try to set a boundary that you're going to be successful at it. This could be different for different people too. That, let's say, there's two people that you need to set boundaries with. You might be better at setting it with one person than another person, but you're going to be like, my best self sets boundaries and I can do it before. Why can't I do it with this person? You have to allow yourself the practice to build up to how your best self would show up. You're going to ask yourself that question. How would my best self react here? Okay, my best self would definitely set a boundary in this circumstance. And you're going to have to work towards acting in alignment with how your best self would react, and not expect for the very first time that you try to set a boundary for it to go flawlessly. Even when you do it the next time and the next time and the next time, maybe you'll start being able to get towards boundary setting territory, but you're stumbling over your words and you don't say exactly what you would have liked to have said. And so you still walk away from that situation saying like, damn it, that's not what I wanted to do, or that's not what I wanted to say. That's not how I perceived my best self to show up. But you then have that perception of how your best self would show up, and you're able to work towards that for the future. You're going to know what your goal is and how you would like to behave, so that you continuously, in every circumstance that you have the chance to show up as how that best self would show up. I would get so mad at myself because I would be like, this is who I want to be. Like, this is who I know I'm capable of being. And I just wouldn't be able to do it. But honestly, I think something that would have helped me a lot is, one, just having like the general awareness of asking myself how my best self would show up, but also remembering and building the habit of consistently asking myself before I react, how would my best self show up? You get so wrapped up into situations and circumstances that you forget to ask yourself that question. A lot of it too is this state of noticing and becoming aware of it, and being able to take a step back and just notice how you react to things and how you wish that you reacted to things is going to make a really big difference in your ability to begin implementing these new behaviors into your life and how you show up in the world, and allowing that to be one of the beginning stepping stones of becoming the best version of yourself. So just to recap, mapping out who the best version of yourself is, having a set list of characteristics and traits that you believe that your best self would be. And by the way, please don't pick things that you think you're supposed to pick or that you should be picking. Pick things that actually make you feel good and feel fulfilled. It doesn't have to be whatever is aesthetic and trending right now. It can be whatever you feel full by. So picking that person and who you would like to become, and then remembering that will fluctuate, and you have to continue to ask yourself that per circumstance, that every circumstance and situation that you're in might warrant a different version of yourself, and your best self might show up differently dependent on who you're with, how things are playing out, how you're feeling that day, and that being okay. A way to get that done could also be creating an alter ego, that you create an identity of a person that you can lean on when you're feeling insecure about you as yourself showing up as this new version of you. You feel like people will judge you. You feel like it will feel weird to do that. So creating this alter identity that you name in your head to play that out until you feel comfortable enough to claim that identity as your own. And lastly, that becoming your best self takes fucking practice. It's not going to just happen overnight. It's not going to be the very next time that you have the opportunity to show up as your best self. Just because you logically know how to does not mean that you have the skill set in order to execute. You have to practice that and get comfortable with it and know how to hold yourself and what words to use. And that's going to take time and energy and practice to really step into that version of you and becoming that best self. Thanks, guys, for listening and sharing your energy and time with me and working hard to become the best version of yourself. I appreciate absolutely every single one of you. If you'd like advice on anything that you're going through, submit it on Wellish's website, wellishpodcast.wordpress.com. There's a submission box there that you can share your story with me, ask your question, whatever the situation is, and I will share my advice with you. You can follow me on Instagram and on TikTok. Both are my first and last name, Sarah Rittendale. Instagram has a dot between my first and last name. And then you can also follow the show on Instagram as well at Wellish Podcast. I hope this episode allows you to start your week on a good note and remembering to ask yourself all week long, how would my elite self show up? You got this. Do not forget you're elite as fuck. I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.